It's all about Knight Rider when I have the huge pleasure of talking to stuntman, stunt coordinator, second unit director on Knight Rider through 4 years, Jack Gill. This is actually a follow-up interview to the one I did about 3 years ago. Today we're going to do it in a bit of a different way. I'm going to watch this episode, Knightmares of Knight Rider, with Jack, and hopefully that will bring up a lot of good memories and fun stories. So hopefully you'll enjoy it.
There we go.
Hi Jack.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. It's fantastic to talk to you. You know, it's just about 3 years since we last had a conversation like this. So yeah, I'm looking very much forward to it, of course. And thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. You know, Knight Rider fans all over the world, they will be thrilled to hear your comments and hear all your stories about the show.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. As I wrote to you, I'm actually just gonna start an episode of Knight Rider, and yeah, hopefully we'll have a lot to talk about, and you'll have a lot of stories, and of course I have some. I'm gonna stray apart from this episode also from time to time. And talk about other types of stunts that we do not see in Knightmares, and that if you have any recollection about how you did this, it would be fantastic. So
sure.
Okay, thanks so much, and I'll just say let's get started. Just give me a second there. Have you watched a Knight Rider episode lately?
I watched pieces of them. A lot of times people send me clips and say, "Hey, take a look at this. Can you see what this is?" And I watch, 5 minutes of it. I haven't watched an entire episode in quite a while, but since I've seen so many of them for so long, I kind of know them in and out. But like I said, it's been 40 years ago, so it's sometimes I can remember a lot of it, and sometimes I can't remember a lot of it.
That's fantastic. So to the audience also, I might say that Jack Gill has done so many big things since Knight Rider. I remember when I talked to you 3 years ago, Jack, you had just finished Bad Boys for Life, and now I know that Fast 10 is coming up in movie theaters. It's also with you as I think a second unit director. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've got a different director this time, and they're going to have a Fast 11, and they think that's going to be the end of the franchise. So we've already been talking about it, and the first Fast 10 is set up so that Fast 11 comes right after it.
Yeah. Okay, but here we see a lot of good stunts, turbo boosts. We're going to return to turbo boost. We're going to return to the semi as well. But I think maybe a good starting point here, Jack, is maybe just fill us in. How did you get to do stunts on Knight Rider?
I had just finished doing Dukes of Hazzard, doubling John Schneider, who was Bo Duke, and I had done that for 4.5 years. And when I finished that show, I went over and did Fall Guy for a couple of years. And they had heard that I had done a lot of jumps on Dukes of Hazzard and was doing a lot of car jumps on Fall Guy. So I was called over to do to do Knight Rider, to start doing some of their big car jumps. And that was on the pilot. And when I came over there, nobody was really doing big car jumps except Dukes of Hazzard at that time. And so we started trying to do the same kind of things that we had been doing before, with the same ramps, the same setup, setting the car up exactly the same. The big difference was that on Dukes, I had a lot more suspension travel. The Knight Rider car was quite a bit lower and sleeker and lower to the ground, and so the landings were a lot harder. And we were also jumping to asphalt and concrete most of the time on Knight Rider, whereas on Dukes of Hazzard, we're jumping to dirt. So it's a little easier landings on Dukes of Hazzard, and So on Knight Rider, I kind of had to buck up and get a little tougher to try and do these jumps because they hurt a lot more than the other ones. And you do pay a price after jumping cars for that long. I've got a titanium plate in my neck with 6 screws in it. And, I don't have really any pain or anything, any long-lasting pain from Knight Rider, but, you have to stop doing car jumps after a while in your stunt career because your body just can't take it. And over my career, I think I've probably done a couple of hundred big car jumps. And, jumping up is great. Landing them, not so great. So that's the hard part is the landings are the ones that take a little toll.
Okay. We'll get back to turbo boosts and jumping cars, I promise you, later. Here we are at the dam. Did you have any impact or anything to say in relation to locations?
Well, I mean, this is Sepulveda Dam, which is in Los Angeles. And it's a very, I guess, a lot of people love to shoot here only because it's so odd looking and has nothing around it really. And so when we went there, it was very hot that day. And I had brought out, this is off the subject completely, but I brought out 2 small pocket motorcycles. They're like these little bitty road race motorcycles that are tiny, 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 just for fun, because somebody had told me about them, and I bought 2 of them. And David Hasselhoff and I got on these things and rode up and down the dam for hours on end, having fun with these things. And we crashed them, and we did all kind of things. And we kept getting yelled at by the director because we weren't shooting the episode. We were playing around on these motorcycles. And I kind of remember it because the dam was so unique in the look. When you look at the slope of the dam and how it drops down, we had so much fun riding up and down this dam on these motorcycles. And I'll bet nobody has ever done that before except David and I. And so that's one of the things that I remember about the dam. And then the other thing that is going to be stuck in my memory forever is when I doubled David doing the explosion, I had to hit an air ram on the grenade explosion and go up, flap in the air and hit the wall and fall. And we had such a wide shot that we couldn't put any pads down at all. So I had to do this air ram and hit the wall, and it knocked me out when I hit the ground. And so I was kind of, that was a hard hit. And so when I hit the ground, it kind of knocked me senseless for a while, and I got over it because it's one of those things that has to happen. But I wish we could have put pads down. We just didn't have pads for the time.
Anything you wear on a jump like that?
I put elbow pads on and knee pads, and you can put some hip pads on, but it's your head that you can't really protect. And when you see me hit the wall, in today's world, we would pad that entire wall, and CGI would make it all go away and make it look like one continuous wall. But back then, we couldn't do that. And so you just had to hit the concrete wall with what it is. And, it's just a hard hit. And back in that day, that's just what you did. So it was tough.
Okay. How about being second unit director and stunt coordinator with different directors? How was your work and the way you worked with the different directors?
Well, the great part about Knight Rider was we had a revolving door of about 5 choice directors that came in and out all the time. So we got to know them very well. And because we shot completely different, when I shot second unit, which is the action unit, I shot completely away from the first unit crew. And so you had pretty much total autonomy as to what you wanted to do and how you wanted to do it. You got notes from the director, definitely, and you got notes from the producers as to what they wanted. But as far as how you shot it and the way that you created it was your own vision. And so I could go out and set cameras and figure out what I really wanted. And that's what was great about, the show, is because you had so much total autonomy to try and get your vision out there. And once they got your confidence that they knew that you could do well, they let you run rampant with it. And that was great. We didn't have, 5 producers and a director sitting over you all the time saying, well, why don't you try this? And why don't you try that? Because when you're shooting action units, you have a lot of stuff to get in a very short amount of time. And I was usually, I don't know if the audience will understand this, but I was usually shooting 80 to 90 setups a day, which is each setup is a portion of filming. And sometimes 3 or 4 cameras, that's 4 setups to get that shot. And so 80 or 90, you're really moving pretty fast to try and get that many things in one day.
Okay, do you have any fun stories? You must have done stunts. We know you did stunts, of course, with David, but did you do any stunts with Edward Mulhare, for example, with Patricia, with Rebecca? Any good stories on these?
Most of the stuff that I did with Rebecca and Edward were just either fight scenes or where they're being grabbed and taken somewhere. Most of them were pretty minimal because they didn't really put their characters into a lot of danger. I mean, we would always have a double riding in the car sometimes. Edward didn't ride in the car very much at all. But Rebecca would be in the car pretty often, and we just have a double for her. But most of the time, it was just being handled, roughly and thrown to the ground and those kind of things. So it was pretty easy for them. A lot of running, there was a lot of running to do. But, my dealings with David were one-on-one. And, they liked to see David drive in and drive out of the shots as fast as he could. But they always wanted to drive the hero car. And the hero car didn't handle great at all. It wasn't set up to do stunts. It was set up to just shoot the interior of the car. And so we would always try and say, if there's a way to get him to drive one of the stunt cars in, let's let him drive that car because it's easier to handle. It slides better. He'll do a lot better with it. Sometimes we could, sometimes we couldn't. But if he had to drive up in the hero car, you had the T steering handle, and to try and get it to spin around, it always was hitting you on the insides of the hands. And, it was a really difficult car to drive just because of the steering wheel.
Yeah, you had the prior experience with a Dodge from the Dukes of Hazzard. Do you remember were there any you could say serial deficiencies with a Pontiac Trans Am?
Well, I mean, when we first started the show, we only had a couple of cars, and so we had to be really, really careful about our jump car because that was also our stunt car. And so we would jump it and then try and fix it and drive the hero car till we got it ready. And luckily, after the first episode, we started getting more cars. And when the show became very successful, Pontiac gave us all the cars for free and we could have as many as we wanted. And then I started adding in many, many more cars that could do certain things, like a car that would go over 130 miles an hour, and then a car would go only 60 miles an hour, but get up there really, really fast. And so the great part about having a multitude of cars is that you could try a lot of things that you normally wouldn't try if you only had one car, because you knew if you heard it, you've got nothing to shoot, and the studio is out a lot of money because time is money when you're shooting, the Knight Rider series. So, a multitude of cars helped a lot, but I liked the fact that we had a great technical crew that was working on the cars, and anything that I wanted done, they put together very quickly. And these were guys that were gearheads and knew everything about the car and could give me a car with a lot of horsepower that could spin the tires really easily. And in a lot of episodes, you see me light up the tires really, really easily in that car. It's because it had 450 horsepower in some of the cars. And that was the great part about it, is I didn't have to explain much to the mechanical team. I could just say, this is what I want the car to do. Can you do it? And they'd say, no problem. Here it is. I'll have it for you tomorrow. So that was the great part about having a good backup team with us, is that they were just as excited about the car as I was. And for them to be able to build cars to do certain things gives them a great sense of appreciation, seeing that they've done something that the audience really loves, because you could tell KITT could go really, really fast. Now, being that it might be 3 cars to get it to go really fast, they show me doing a big burnout in the car that only went 60 miles an hour. And then the next shot, I'm doing 130 in the car that is built for high speed. Yeah, it's a different car, but in the show, you can't really tell.
Yeah. Do you have any memories on spectators while doing the stunt scenes?
Yeah, I mean, the spectator part of Knight Rider, when we first started, we really didn't have a whole lot of people watching us. We'd have people come by and say, what are you shooting? And that's about all we got. the scanner on the front that was going back and forth always caught people's attention. And a lot of times when we were shooting in West Covina, California, people would come up there because we would shoot in a little town and amongst all these little shops that were around. And people would always wonder what that was because it reminded them of Battlestar Galactica and, the thing that went across their faces. Yeah. So it was something that Glenn Larson had picked up from there. And that's what caught their attention more than anything right off the bat, is people that were Battlestar Galactica fans saw the car and saw the scanner and couldn't figure out what the correlation was because Knight Rider wasn't known back then. It was still pretty new and nobody had seen it. So after about the fourth episode that had been aired, we started picking up a lot of bystanders, and it started getting to where then we started to having to hire policemen to try and hold everybody back, and everybody wanted to kick the car and touch the car and see what it did and see if it could talk. And so it built quickly. And once it built quickly, we had to invest more money for people to protect the car and protect us. And even, most of the time when I'm doing very, very big, long jumps, we do have a lot of protection from security guards that are keeping people out of the way. But we found out that because they had seen a couple of episodes, they knew that the car jumped high in the air. So if I was jumping the car from one alley to the other alley, people would get in the second story windows to take pictures. And as I was flying the car across the way, I would see people sticking their heads out of the windows to watch the car. So it's lucky that I was on the right line, because if I'm on the right line, I could have hit these people. And at the time, I didn't even think about it. So after that, we had to say, you got to look up in the windows, guys. And if you see people in the windows, you got to go up there and ask them not to shoot from those windows or go up another story. I'm never going to go 3 stories high, but 2 stories high, I get very easily. So that was something that was new to us back then, because on Dukes of Hazzard, I was never jumping in town. I was always jumping out in the boonies somewhere. And in Knight Rider, we were always jumping the car in town somewhere. So that was another aspect of it that we kind of had to take into consideration.
Great. Now, I just paused the episode because we're coming to a legendary turbo boost. And we're going to talk about the auto cruise with a blind drive as well. I expect that even though it appears that KITT is driving itself, it's got the tinted windows. So I guess that you or one of the other stunt men on the show are actually in it.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, the windows were tinted when we didn't really know that the blind drive seat was going to work, or there was some other reason. But the blind drive seat worked really, really well. I mean, George Barris and put it together so that you wouldn't know, being 10 feet away from the car, that it was being driven from the right-hand seat or the left-hand seat or anywhere. And the fact that we had the pillar right next to me hiding the width of my body, that really helped a lot as well. And because the seat was wider, I had a little Velcro fabric piece that I could pull back and look out the side to see my marks. If the camera wasn't on that side of the car, I could pull the Velcro back and kind of pull my head back and see where I needed to stop if I couldn't see forward very well. Yeah, because I'm so low, and I'm looking right over the dash. Usually when you sit in a car, you sit up pretty high and you can see the front end. You can see down the front end. Well, when you're really low and just looking right over the steering wheel, you can't really see anything right below you. So I had to get a mark out to the side, to the right or the left, so I knew exactly when to stop, because camera marks, when you're having to stop for David, have to be within inches, because then they don't line the car up properly. So I got comfortable picking a mark out the side of the car and coming up really, really fast and slamming on the brakes and hitting a mark, just because I could see out the right and the left by this little piece of fabric.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, coming to the turbo boost now. Can you talk a bit about the preparations prior to the turbo boost like this?
On this one, this was alley to alley, and we had to run a bulldozer grader through there, because it was so bouncy coming in there that I was having a real hard time getting the speed. When I came through there the first time, there was a dip coming in there, and I would get a lot of height and then not get back on the ground, and I could see I wasn't going to get the speed up to make the distance across. So we had to put dirt in between the street across on my lead up so that I could come across there at speed and not have the big dip. So there's a lot of things that you don't see in the movie that I had to put in there so that we could get the speed to get the distance across. And there's always, construction banners set up and these sawhorses with the blinky lights, and there's always a dirt pile to the jump ramp. That's just something that's been around forever that we do. And then my brother, Andy Gill, was in there as one of the construction workers, and there's a couple of other stunt guys in there as well. And I said, look, when I jump across, just react to it. But remember, we're putting dirt on top of my ramp, so the car is going to carry a lot of dirt through the air. So just get your arm up in front of your face, because it's probably going to throw a lot of rocks and everything else, because I'm coming across at 75 miles an hour. So there's a lot of things that happened in this that the audience doesn't see, but it was a pretty smooth landing on the other side. The car bounced a little bit, but other than that, it landed pretty well.
Yeah, let's see it. How many different ramp sizes did you use? Because you had to make a lot of different turbo boosts, length and height-wise.
Yeah, most of my ramps are, for the big jumps, there's not a whole lot of difference in sizes. There's only, 8 inches to a foot in difference from really, really big jumps to jumps that are 120 feet. The 120-foot jump is a small jump. That's in length. And I don't know what that is in meters, but you can figure. One of the things that happens with big jumps is that I usually go up in height, and I go longer in length just a little bit, so it doesn't pop me so high and I can get the length. If I don't lengthen the ramp a little bit, then it'll pop me really, really high, and the landing on the other side is very harsh. Yeah. So the ramps were all aluminum, and so they were easily movable, and they were only 14 feet to 16 feet in length and 36 inches high. Sometimes I would go 30 inches, sometimes I would go 36 inches high, sometimes I would go 40 inches high, depending on what I wanted. But there was a lot of things that I did to the car to make it bounce up in the air and get straight across, because what we wanted was a lot of height and a lot of distance. But we found out that if you get up to around 20 feet high, the landing on the other side is really, really harsh. The car comes apart, sometimes breaks in half. So usually 12 to 14 feet in height is about ideal for what they liked, so that you can see what you're jumping over. Because if you get way too high, you go out of the top of the frame of the camera and it's not usable. So they want something that stays in frame and you can see what you're jumping over. So the great part about that construction site was I was low enough to the ground, you could still see the people reacting, but I still made the other side of the ramp clearing the whole road. So there's a lot of things that we had to take into consideration when you do a jump like that. It can't be simply, let's just go really, really big, and the car goes way high out of frame and goes way long, and the operators don't like the shot. So it has to be designed so that it fits the shot that they want.
You had different cars to choose from every time you made a jump. But as far as I know, you had some cars that were more or less dedicated to doing the jumps. And you also had a dune buggy with a kind of a rubber chassis or something like that, or a rubber frame to put over. Can you talk about how did you choose which car to use on which jump?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, when we started getting jump cars, the jump cars had to be completely different than my stunt cars, because the jump cars had to have a full cage in them to protect me. And they had to have a weight box in the back, and they had to have the weight box welded to the cage. And we had to have what's called a fuel cell. So the gas tank gets taken out of the car for safety purposes. And a fuel cell goes in there so that if it gets punctured, it can't catch on fire. It can't blow up. It can't do anything out of the ordinary, because it's got this protective cell around it that is metal and encased and very, very difficult to damage, to puncture. So we had a lot of things going on with the jump car. that were not in my regular stunt car.
Were they all configured in exactly the same way? You smashed a car during a jump, and you would get a new one with the exact same configuration. How did that work?
Yeah, exactly the same configuration, because they had to hide the roll cage inside the car so that you couldn't see it from a camera on the outside. And so it had to be really, really tight up against the A and B pillars and really, really high into the ceiling and back. And so it was one of those types of things that was difficult for the welders to do, because on a car like that, it's tough to hide a big, huge 2-inch pipe throughout the entire car and not let cameras see it. So in some cases, I'm sure you can slow it down and you can see the piping inside the car. But that was one of the things that would protect us. And I got to say, over the entire, all the seasons of Knight Rider, knock on wood, I never had a car turn over on me where I actually needed the cage. Yes, it was great to have the cage so that the car didn't bend in half, but I never turned it over, which is one of the reasons we had a big cage in there. But in case it did turn over, it doesn't crush the roof and kill me. So I'm happy to have it. I'm happy to have it there. But the fact that I didn't need it is even better.
A turbo boost, a new turbo boost is coming up now on screen, and as I can see, this is with the dune buggy with the cover, the kit cover above it. When did you choose to use this car?
I didn't choose to it. I didn't like it at all. I hated this thing. The producers decided to choose this car simply because it was a new idea that they thought they could jump it multiple times without having any damage, minimal damage. They thought this thing would jump through the air and hit and land and drive away. That's not what really happened. Is that the first time we tried to jump it, it just bounced really weird and it didn't look like a real car. And we called it the Flivvermobile, Flivver, because it kind of just looked unreal. It bounced around and it didn't have a big engine in it. It had a Volkswagen engine in it. And you couldn't really go really fast. So it didn't last long. It only lasted a couple of episodes and we got rid of it. And when we were testing it out at Saga Speedway, the first time we jumped it and it landed, it shot shock absorbers through the back of it and destroyed the whole back of the car. And it all came apart. And it was a test to see if we could get a car that we could jump time and time again. And we went right back to the real jump car because it looked the best and you could land and drive away without it looking like things were falling off of it.
Just off your head, how many of the cars used for a jump, for a turbo boost, were smashed and replaced?
I mean, I think most of the time, one of my stunt cars would last 2 jumps, maybe. They'd have to have considerable work done to get them back going because they would bend up pretty bad. But I would get 2 jumps on it, and then we'd rotate it, put it to the back of the pack, bring in one of the newer ones, and I'd start jumping that, and they would work on the one that needed a complete new cage and everything else. We'd use the same car, but we put everything in it that had been. Usually when the car bends, it bends right past the front wheels and bends like a V. And they have to bend that back out. Well, you can only do that once or twice before it gets very, very weak. Oh. And so we would have to take the whole cage out, put a new cage in so that it's strong again.
Okay, I think we're coming to a shooting scene now, if I remember correctly. In what respect were you involved in a scene like that? Were you in charge when they did a scene like the one I think we're going to see now, where the bad guy is shooting at David?
Oh, we had to put that ladder in. There's no ladder there really. You couldn't run up the side of that thing without the ladder there.
Wow. So now we've got a guy shooting at David.
Yeah. So that's the effects guys. The special effects team is shooting what's called a capsule gun. And a capsule gun has a little pellet that looks like a big pill, and it's got, just a dust in it, and it's plastic pellet that has dust in it, and he shoots from up there where that guy is at David, and when it hits the ground, the pellet pops apart, and the dust pops in the air, and it looks like a bullet hit. So, and that's me come flying up, and we put a little dust on the ground to make it look like it was faster because I came in really fast. And then now what you're seeing is called a Zirc gun, ZIRC. And it's the same gun the effects guys are using, but it's a plastic capsule and it has these exploding, they're spark hits inside of it. And when they hit anything hard, they create a spark effect when they blow up. It doesn't hurt you. I mean, if you got hit with it, it would sting, but that's about it. But it has to hit something hard to create a spark effect. So when we shoot at the car or at the ground, they use these Zirc hits to create the spark effect.
Okay. Now we get into...
What I'd like to add to one of the things that you got to be really careful of, which is so great about the effects guys, is they're really shooting a gun at an actor, which they don't do anymore. I mean, in today's world, you could never do that. They would never let you shoot a projectile at an actor. But back then, we did it a lot, and actors got peppered, which means you're getting the debris usually hits you and stings your arms or stings your legs, or you feel something that hits you. It doesn't draw blood or anything; it just stings. But that was something we did a lot back then. It was commonplace for an actor to get peppered by these Zirc guns or these capsule guns, and it was just a normal occurrence. And in today's world, we don't do it.
Things change. Also, yeah. I think today when we look at behind the scenes footage from new TV and film, CGI is mentioned almost constantly. So
it is.
That must be a very big difference. Jack, if we can talk, I think that we have 5 or 6 minutes now before the next real action scene is coming up. If we can talk a bit about some of the other stunts that we saw numerous times on Knight Rider. For example, at least a couple of times we see David getting out of a trunk, perhaps in a car that moves in front of KITT, and climbing onto KITT's hood and getting into KITT afterwards. Can you talk a bit about how you did scenes like that?
Explain to me again. He goes in the back. Am I going to see it?
He climbs KITT's hood while KITT is driving.
Yeah. One of the things we always did, if David was going to climb out, David would start the climb out and then climb across the top while I'm blind driving. And then we would cut to a double doing all the bouncy things and jumping around and stuff. And then cut back to David, and I would put David in a harness and tie him to the hood so that he can't fall off of it. And then he can react. We always had usually a harness on David, and he was tied to the car so that if I had to hit the brakes fast or I had to get out of the way of something fast, he couldn't get slung off the car. Okay.
How about driving through a minefield of explosions? We see that at least a couple of times in Knight Rider as well.
Yeah, we like to do that a lot. We did that. I mean, they seemed to like the fact that the car was indestructible, and they wanted to show how that works. So we would set up these big explosions, and effects would tell me to get as close as I could to them. And we sealed the entire underneath of the car up when we literally got it up on jacks and looked underneath it for any holes at all, and sealed it all up with steel so that the explosions couldn't get inside the car and get me. And then we just put big gasoline explosions out there, and I ran over the top of them. And it worked great because it enveloped the car in gasoline and would usually catch the car on fire for 3 or 4 seconds. And it looked great. And so the more we did it, the more we thought the audience liked it. So we set up an entire minefield out there, and I would just zigzag it in around the explosions, and I could run right over the top of them without any harm because I knew the underside of the car was completely sealed.
Yeah. That's awesome. How about we have also a couple of scenes in kind of the same area with a bomb exploding under KITT. KITT saves Michael by taking the blast from the bomb.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those bombs like that you see are called black powder bombs, and if if you put a black powder bomb in and tape it up really tight for the explosions, like if you hold a firecracker in your hand, it becomes really, really powerful. But if you take a black powder bomb and open it up, they could put it in a hole in the ground, and I could drive over the top of it and they blow it up with a lot of debris and dust in there, and it looks like an enormous explosion, but it has really no impact. So it just would go out and around the car without really hurting the crew or hurting me or hurting anybody else around the car. So it's all a pyrotechnic effect that gives the audience a really big blast, but without a lot of concussion.
Okay. A couple of specific questions as well. I don't know if you remember the turbo boost where KITT jumps into a small airplane, right into it up.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories regarding that stunt?
Have you got that clip there, or is it not going to come up?
I think I can find it. We can take it once this is over. We can find. Also, I have a question regarding of course, or would like you to talk about the ravine shot. The ravine turbo boost, also a very epic turbo boost. Maybe we could jump a bit ahead of things. A stunt scene is coming up in a minute. Maybe you could talk about how would you prepare David, and in this regard also the guy he's fighting for a fighting scene.
Yeah, most of the time when we were putting together fight scenes for David really, really liked the fact that he wanted to fight like John Wayne. He didn't want to throw a punch like John Wayne, where it looks like you hit a guy so hard and it knocked him on his back in one punch. He didn't just snap his head and take it. David wanted to knock people on their butt because he's a 6'4" guy. He's a big guy. And so most of the time when we put these stunts together, we wanted David to be very, very powerful. So most of that is from your shoulders. And I was teaching David to throw with his shoulders and rotate with his shoulders when he throws the punch so that it shows power. Ooh, I hated this one right here. This little one was tough. When I jumped out right here, can I go to this one? Because this one was a tough one.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
This one was one that we set up, and they wanted me to jump out of off this penthouse, jump in, and the car catches me. And so we put the car up on a flatbed car carrier. If you know, a car carrier is 2 stories. We put the car up on 2 stories, and then I jump out and have to go by the car, and it looks like I'm landing in the seat, although I just fall right past the car into an airbag, and the seat drops down, and it looks like I got caught by the car. But on that one, was pretty bad. I broke my neck on that one, so that one was bad. Okay. But it was I was out for a while on that one, but I did 2 shots going by the car, and the director said, I can see that you're laying out backwards before you get to the car. And if you do that, it looks like you hit the back of the car. So you have to go by the car straight up and down and land in the bag feet first. And I said, I can't land in the bag feet first from that kind of height. There's no way. I'll just try and throw back as late as possible. So I did a second take, and he still said, you got to wait longer. So the third take, I waited as long as I could do, and I just threw as hard as I could, and it worked in the shot, but I broke a little piece of vertebrae in the back of my neck on that one. And, it didn't cause any paralysis. It just hurt like hell, and I had to go to the hospital, and I was out for a while, but everything, I was still working. It was just, I tell people I broke my neck. I wore a collar for a while, and it was about all it really was. It wasn't where I had to get surgery or anything. So, when you say break your neck, it's not as bad. It was just a tiny little fracture in one of my vertebrae that I had to wear a collar for. So that was a tough stunt for me to do because they wanted something exactly specific with me going by the car and look like the seat caught me. So it was a tough one.
Yeah. Was that your worst injury on Knight Rider?
Yeah, on Knight Rider it was. I mean, I've broken my back twice, but those were on other shows. Okay. So yeah, that was about the only real injury I got on Knight Rider was that one. And
I
You know,
I
most
heard you
people,
tell a story as well about breaking an ankle.
yeah, I did break an ankle, but that was just an ankle. An ankle's pretty easy. On a stunt guy, everybody breaks their ankle. It's pretty easy. Not many people break their neck, but the ankle thing was, I mean, probably 1 in 100 that would ever happen again. Do you know the story, or do you want me to repeat
I
it?
heard you tell it, but I'm sure that not all the viewers have heard it. So I think it's actually you told it very well last time I heard it.
Yeah, it was. I had my brother blind drive. My brother Andy would blind drive the KITT car when I was doubling a character, and I was playing a bad guy and just doubling a bad guy. And I have to jump over a little tiny 3-rail fence and out into the street. And when I run into the street, my brother rounds the corner in the KITT car, blind driving, and hits me. And I go up over the car and go to the ground, and he stopped the bad guy. And so we rehearsed me jumping over the fence and running out of the street. And then my brother would stop and say, yeah, the timing looks great. And I said, okay, let's shoot it. So I got back, and the way that really happens, once you roll camera, every stuntman gets a little more adrenaline pumping. And so when I jumped over the fence this time, I went a little further out, and I landed half on the curb and half off with my foot, and it broke my ankle. And I heard it snap, and I ran 3 steps out in the street, and my brother hit me with a car. And I went up and over the car and landed in the street. And, you know, the director came over, and I said, hey, my ankle's broken. And he said, well, I could see that you broke your ankle because you limped going out to when the car hit you. And I said, well, my ankle's broken. So he goes, well, what do we do now? Because we have to do it again. So I said, if you tape my ankle up, let's get some duct tape and we'll tape it up really, really tight before it swells up. And I can probably do one more before I go to the hospital. So we got back as quickly as we could, and we taped it all up. And I did it all again. And the one you see in the movie, in the TV show, is me with my ankle taped up. And then I went to the hospital. So in today's world, they would never let you do that. They would send you to the hospital and bring in another stunt guy. But back then, that's kind of what stunt people did. It wasn't unheard of, and it wasn't something out of the ordinary. That's just what we did back then, and kind of the way it was. But yeah, that was it. That's probably the only 2 injuries I had. And no, I broke some ribs. I broke some. God, I can remember these things. I did a pipe ramp of a car. KITT hits a car, and I hit a pipe ramp this car out in the middle. It drops away and bounces really hard, and the seat broke loose from the car, and I hit the side of my ribs and broke 3 ribs. So
okay.
It happens.
That's what happens. Okay, let's move on with this. We got this over with. Also, some very neat auto cruising, blind driving during this scene. The next thing that happens is a pretty, I would say, probably for you, pretty regular stunt driving. Probably David in some clips, but I expect, how would you normally do this? Would that be you coming around with a reverse 180?
That's probably me right there, because the tires are smoking and everything. It could be David. It's hard to see in your thing. I don't know. That might be David, because usually in my reverse 180s, they come around a little quicker and cleaner. So I don't know what that was. That could have been me. Could have been David. Like I say, it's a good shot. So we used it in the show. But David was a really good driver. Once I took him out in the parking lot, and I had about 3 or 4 hours, of total time with David in a car playing around. And we over the period of about 3 weeks, he would drive really pretty well for a lot of it. He could do a lot of the things that all the other stunt guys could do just as well. So he was a really good driver.
How was the decision of whether you should be driving the car or David should be driving the car?
It was, the directors always wanted David to drive the car, because that means they could have him come into the shot and see his face. If it looked like there was any chance that we were going to hurt him, then I had to step in and say, look, if he pitches this car around and hits a telephone pole, you're not working with David the rest of the day or the rest of the week, and nobody's going to like that. So if there was, if he hits a curb, it's no real big deal. That just hurts the car, and we can live with that. But if it looks like we're going to hurt David, I have to step in and say, that's it. He's not going to do it. So that's kind of the key decision, is that as the stunt coordinator, you have to make key decisions on David's welfare. And also, if David's not working, the crew's not working. So that means you're taking food out of the crew's mouth as well. So David is the golden goose. You have to be really, really careful about what you let him do. Even though he's capable of doing it, you have to be smart about when you let him do certain things and when you don't. Because even in a fight scene, if David twists his ankle and can't walk, you're not shooting with him the next day. It's a tough, tough decision.
Okay, we now have David in the semi, and of course I would also like to hear something about how you drove KITT into the semi and how you drove KITT out of the semi.
Well, when Glenn Larson first told me about this, we went out there and we tried to fit the car in there to see what it, how close it was going to be, what it was going to be, what we had to do, and it was really, really tight. I only had about 4 inches on either side of the mirror to get the car in there. And when we got it in there, we figured it tries to, when you jump up the ramp, if you're coming in at any speed, it likes to jump. The minute the back wheels touch the back of the ramp, it likes to push forward quick. So originally the ramp was made out of steel and it had grippy surfaces on it, so that when I got in there, it wouldn't go right or left. It would stay straight. But the grippy surface made me really jump forward a lot quicker, and it was really hard for me to stop on the other side. So what we did was we took the grippy surface off the front end of the ramp so that when I came in, the back wheels would spin for a second, and it wouldn't jump forward, and then I could get onto the grippy surface, and it would slow the car down, and I'd come in at a normal rate. So that was the key thing that made, driving into the semi work, is I knew if I kept the car straight, the tires would spin for a second and then I could get my bearings and I could drive in normal without it jumping in there. Because a lot of times we had cameras on the inside of the semi and operators and assistants, and I didn't want to hit them. There was no place for them to go if I came in at any speed. There were times when I did clip a mirror, but the mirror would fold in a little bit. And there were times that I went a little long, but luckily the times that I went long, there was nobody in there to, that I could hit. So I never really damaged the semi. I damaged the car a couple of times, but only 2 I can think of where I really hit a mirror. But it was tough. It was tough to keep the car straight because the semi truck was doing probably 40 to 45 miles an hour. And I was coming in at probably 55 to 60, and at those speeds you come in pretty fast, and it's a tough thing to do. It's called precision driving, and you just have to practice it a lot.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to talk a bit about the semi. My good friends at the Knight Rider Historians, they have, I don't know if you know this, they have found both the semi, both the tractor and the trailer of the original semi. And they have found out that there's been some damage on the rear left of the trailer. Do you have any memories regarding an accident with the semi?
No, no. In fact, I had Al Jones, a stuntman who drove that semi 99% of the time in the shots, and he was an excellent semi driver as well as an excellent stuntman, and he always kept the thing rock solid for me. He didn't waver even an inch when I was driving up. And I can't think of any damage that we ever had with that thing because I always went up and in pretty cleanly, and I always came out pretty cleanly. There was always really no problems at all with it. So I can't think of when the damage would have happened.
We only have a few episodes with the semi. We have one where the semi is hijacked by a motorcycle gang, bikers. Any recollections in regard to the opening and closing of the rear end of the semi?
Well, sometimes that thing would work 90% of the time. Sometimes it had problems, and I would start to come up, and I'd get on the ramp, and as I came in, it's supposed to start rising up, and sometimes it would rise up and stop. Well, then they got to cut to something else, and so I'd have to go back out and do it again. And sometimes when I was going to enter it, it has to go down and hit the ground. And we had rollers on the bottom of the ramp so it wouldn't create sparks. And we found out that the rollers failed fairly quickly because the speeds we were doing, the little tiny rollers couldn't keep going fast enough. So we put in a type of thick plastic called Delron. We would underneath the bottom of where the ramp would touch the ground, we put in this black Delron plastic, and it would just slide across the ground, and that didn't create any sparks, and I could enter and exit pretty easily. So there was a lot of, I don't know, trying to figure out what worked best for that big, huge gate that went up and down on it. But it was really, really heavy. And the winches that pulled the two cables up, had to work very, very hard. They went up through the top of the semi and all the way down the length of the semi and down to two big winches. And there was an special effects guy on the button. And the minute he saw me come in, he would start pulling it up. So like I said, it worked probably 90% of the time, but sometimes it didn't. But I never really saw it drop. I never saw the cables break. That was all pretty well. That worked pretty well for the whole time we were there.
Okay. Great. Now we get into another at least a smaller fight scene here, also with some of the other guys from the show, and we got yet another scene with Michael driving up and hitting the brakes and getting out, and the next thing we will see is Michael going to the art studio, and there's a fight scene there, and he backs up afterwards and smashes the garage door on his way out. Mm-hmm. Can you tell more about how did that work? Because KITT was indestructible, almost at least. How did that work when you smashed KITT through walls and gates and things like that?
Yeah, most of the time. I mean, I crashed KITT through so many things; it's hard to remember all of them. But there were, I went into a jail cell one time. I've been through, I went into a church one time. One of the ones that was the most difficult was crashing through a cement wall, a cinder block wall. And, it was extremely thick because they wanted me to carry a lot of the wall out with me to look like it was a really, really thick wall that KITT was going through. Well, what special effects department makes is it's called Pyrocell, and it looks exactly like concrete, and it's pretty heavy, but it's not as strong as concrete. But when you crash through it, it caved my entire windshield in, to almost hit me in the face, and which is pretty scary because I've got a protective plastic. It's not plastic, it's called Lexan, right behind the windshield, but it still caved that whole thing in and almost hit me because this brick wall was so thick. So we really had to worry about things like that when we crashed through them, because the body could take almost anything, but the windshield was where you really had the damage part of it, because the windshield was not indestructible, and I could put Lexan behind it, which protected me, but you could still push the entire thing, the windshield and the Lexan, in on top of me if I hit something hard enough. So that was the thing we had to really worry about. Which one is this? What am I crashing through here? Oh, that's the aluminum wall.
That's a garage door, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty easy. That I went through pretty easily. This is all David fighting.
In this scene, he needs 2 punches to close the lights for the bad guy.
Yep, he has to pick him up and talk to him and then hit him again.
Yeah. So on driving out, at least getting into the hero car, you didn't see that much?
No, in this one, let me look and see which one we did here. Did I go out backwards or did I go out forwards?
Yeah, backwards.
Oh, wow. So that was a tough one, only because they put cameras right outside the door, and they said, we want you to throw the reverse 180 right as you know the front end has cleared the sides of the door. But you can't throw it too late because now you're past camera. We want to see it happen right in front of camera. So I had the door, I raised the door, and I practiced throwing the reverse 180 so that it would go. But the problem you have is that if you throw it too early, the car won't fit through the door, and the front end's going to hit the side of the wall. Okay. So I have to throw it just when I know the front end gets past the wall. And so that was a tough one. That was a timing thing. And, you know, I made it and it looked great, but I got to say, I wouldn't want to do that one a second time. That was a tight fit.
Okay. So we're coming towards the end now of this episode. And we end up with a stunt scene and with a you could say miniature turbo boost, but at least with a lift off from a real car. Can you talk us a bit about or talk us through when did you know, okay, this is only the beginning, this is or only the landing? I know you did some of those as well.
Yeah, I mean, we always did. When they started doing miniatures, which we all hated the miniatures because back then they were just not very realistic. And it was, we knew we always needed a takeoff, we always needed a landing. And the middle part they would do. And the only times that they really did miniatures was either because they were doing something that we couldn't really fly the car and land without hurting either myself or my brother or somebody else. And it was something that was beyond our ability, and we just didn't want to hurt anybody. So that's pretty much when we started doing miniatures. But we always knew we were going to do a mini ramp, takeoff and landing. And that was a smaller ramp, but we still flew the car probably 80 to 90 feet, but it was only 3 or 4 feet off the ground instead of being 12 feet off the ground. So you'd get the car flying, starting off the ground, flying through the air. And sometimes we used a mirror. You know about the mirrors, where you put a mirror on the side of the ramp and tilt it toward the ground, and you could shoot, and you wouldn't see the ramp because the mirror would reflect the ground and the camera would not see it. Yeah. So we did that a lot. And then on the landing, I would do the exact same thing and come off the ramp, and they would just shoot the landing and not see the takeoff. So it would usually be 2 different spots. Yeah. We would take off from one spot and then go put where we knew the car was landing and set the ramps up again and do just the landing.
And it's
and those cars were normally just stunt cars. They weren't jump cars. I would jump just a stunt car without a cage in it, without a fuel cell, without anything. Just jump that car to the ground because I didn't need a cage because it was only 3 or 4 feet off the ground. Yeah.
Okay, and it's coming now. And also we have in the ending we have a small fight scene, and we have actually auto cruise, blind drive right next to David or close to him at least, and we have some high speed driving. We got a reverse 180 here with a blind drive.
Yep.
Pretty well done. How much would you rehearse a fight scene like this?
We would put tiny little 1.5-inch crash pads in there and rehearse for probably 15, 20 minutes until everybody had it right. And we'd make little, if David wanted to throw 1 or 2 punches differently, we'd change that. But normally, they'd get a good 20-minute rehearsal before we started it so we could go up. And, it all worked pretty seamlessly. When you saw the tackle, that was doubles going to the ground and then David and the actor getting up.
Yeah. So now we've got the turbo boost lift off just in a few seconds, and followed by miniature flying and miniature landing. I think it's quite easy to see. I don't think you'll be really impressed. I don't know. I think it's one of those things. It was maybe a bit easier to cope with on a 24 or on a small tube television than it is on big screens today.
I don't know. Even back in the 80s, it still looked pretty bad to the stunt industry. We could tell that it wasn't real, and it's like you say, everybody had smaller TVs back then, so maybe it wasn't as noticeable.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we got lift off here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the trajectory and everything is fine. And we definitely could not have done that for real. Oh. Now the landing is miniature. That landing right there was a miniature landing.
Yeah, you could easily see it.
Yeah, it bounces.
Yeah.
And on that day we did a real landing. I don't know why they used that one, but we did a real landing.
Yeah. So,
and that's really David. And I don't know why they left the tow bars on the front of the car, but they still leave the tow bars in the front of the car.
Yeah, but they did. I think at this point they had 2 cars with tow bars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and the episode now is coming to an end. So we'll just watch the last piece. We get into just in a minute into the Universal studio scene stage. I can't remember if it's stage 1 or where it is. But were you ever there, or were you always out in?
No, I was on the stage a lot. I would always come by just to get notes from the director and from David to see what they wanted exactly before we would shoot the next day. And sometimes we had fights on the soundstage and we had different things to do. But I was definitely there every single day doing something, whether it was prepping the next show, or because we had always production meetings on what we were going to do on the next episode. We'd have one day where we had to go to a production meeting and talk about the next episode while they were shooting dialogue scenes like this.
Okay, so yeah. Well, it's been fantastic. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this episode of Knight Rider. I know that there's been a lot of new good stories that has come to life, and when this is over, I'll just find the 2 clips of KITT flying through the airplane, and also of course the ravine jump. So we will have to have a chance to comment on them. Are there any other specific scenes that you remember and you think, okay, that was probably my best work on Knight Rider?
Well, I mean, I think out of all of it, you mentioned it, with the ravine jump was a really big one for me, because that was one of the longest jumps we had ever done, and it was also across a ravine where you can't be short. And so that one was one that was, I don't know, kind of, you had to really sit down and think about that one, because we had to get a bulldozer again and grade a road in to create a road in a pasture so that I could get the speed up to make that jump. And so it was difficult. And, it was one that I will always remember, because at the time I was thinking about it, you were going, man, if you're short on this one, you're going straight to the hospital. You're not going to survive this one much at all. So I had to keep my foot in it, and I had to get the speed I needed, and I had to do a lot of things to make it all work.
So there we have it. I think it's quite light on.
I was lucky to get my credit right there at the end of the show, because they always put it up with the sun right there in the end, and I was lucky to have that credit.
They did. Okay, I think it's maybe easier to see right now. So
yeah.
Okay, great. I'll just try to see if I can find these 2 other clips, and we can talk about them as well. Okay, so let's watch this. We got
we had a plane that had blown the engine. The engine was gone, and it had lots of structural damage. And they told us that we could tow it in and hit it. And at the time we did it, it was we knew we were going to go. It was all cut up. We had effects cut it all up so that you could get through it. And Bob Braver did this jump and did a little mini ramp jump through the plane. Let's see if you can see. They put tons of sparks inside the plane when it, but we're towing it in with a balsa wood propeller on it spinning. That's me doing the slide. And then that's a real airplane. Yeah, that's all real airplane. And there it is, bang. So we towed it through and did a little, and those are all mounts on it coming out the other side. So it worked pretty well.
It looks good, and
Yeah.
there is something very honest with a car flying through the air when we talk about what CGI does these days.
Well, and we had talked about having the airplane catch on fire, you know, blowing through it, having the airplane catch on fire. But after we had that conversation, we said, if we let the fire, you know, if we make it continue to stay on fire, then we got to get the guy out of it so David can hit him.
Yeah.
And so if the whole inside of it is all on fire, you're never going to believe that we could have got the guy out of it. So we had the fire go out pretty quickly. You would know better than I would.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah, reused footage. Yeah. So, but here it comes. Here it comes.
Yeah. See, that's the road we graded in with a big bulldozer.
And is that a jacket hanging out of the window?
It is the Knight Rider, the black jacket. Only because I usually did not put the jacket on. I wear a jump harness that goes around my rib cage, and I have straps over the top, and I connect myself to the ceiling and bungee cord. And there's really no way to get the jacket because I've got bungee cords coming out of my shoulders going up to the roll bar. And then I press myself into a safety belt, and that's what keeps me from breaking my back.
Yeah.
And the costumer came in and wanted me to put the jacket on. And I said, the only way you can do it is to cut the jacket and put it around me. And so he made a couple of slices and just kind of draped it over my shoulders. But since the window is open, you know, when I made the jump, the jacket flew out the window and hung up and came outside the car. And back then, you didn't have CGI to paint out that part of it. So that's the Michael Knight jacket coming out of the car.
Fantastic. Okay, Jack Gill, thanks so much for doing this.
Sure.
It has been a huge pleasure. And of course, I would love to do another one of these in sometime in the future. But for now, it's just been fantastic talking to you.
Thanks, Jacob. It's been great for me too.
Okay.